the presentation, and we're really delighted to have her joining with us to do this presentation and collaborating between Strategies and UCSF and the program that they're operating, and she'll tell you more about that program. You see this slide. Barbara is doing some pre and post testing, and so all of you should have a sheet that has a series of questions kind of asking you where you are on a continuum with these various elements. And so you'll see that there's a little tricky way of coding this, and that is the last two letters of your mother's maiden name. So that is what goes on the top of your sheet, and the phone number. Last four digits. Okay, and then we'll collect those, and she'll do this again at the end of the series. So thank you for taking care of that. So you'll see that the name of our series, this is Barbara's name for the series, and it's a really, I think it's very comprehensive. It tells us that we're using the centrality of relationships as a protective factor in building resiliency. And you may remember that one of the things that we're trying to do in the northern region is really focus on resiliency building. So we're going further upstream than we have been before by really looking at this early childhood mental health. And so the rest of it is infusing early childhood and mental health principles and practices across the care continuum for children and families. And it's really neat that we get a chance to continue building from one session to the next and really taking a good look and a comprehensive look at early childhood mental health. And I've already explained that to you. So session one, title, core principles and practices. These are the counties that we have joining us today. And the way that we function is through a hub location, and we are here in Reading today. This is our hub, and the hub location has all the equipment and has the presenters generally. And then we also connect with remote sites. And so we have Mendocino County and Sharon, and we have County of Lake, and I don't know whether it's Anna or Doreen, but I think it's Doreen today. And we have County of Humboldt with Dora, who is the facilitator. These, in every one of the remote locations, we have a facilitator who kind of, come on in. We have a facilitator who is our link and makes copies and kind of summarizes what the discussion is in the room and feeds that back into the hub location so that we can hear what we're saying from place to place. We have Siskiyou County, and we have the online folks as well. So what we'd like to do is to pause for a moment here, and in each one of your locations, if you could take a look at who's in your room and just tell us, I will go back county by county and ask if you can give us a representation of the organizations that are in your room. And I'll start off. We went through and we did a introduction here in our room, and I'm looking at the sign-in sheet now to kind of give you a sense of who the folks are in this room, the different agencies. So we have Shasta County HHSA, Perinatal Treatment, Shasta County Health and Human Services, Remy Vista Infant Development Program, Shasta County YMCA, Health and Human Services BHT, Behavioral Health, Shasta County Office of Education, Shasta First 5, Shasta County Children's Services, Walden University. We have a student here with us. And we have Shasta County Health and Human Services Agency Children's. And we have Shasta County Children's Services and another SCOE. Did I miss anyone? Any organization? Good. Thank you. So let's turn to Mendocino County. And Sharon, can you just give us a report on who's in your room, what organizations you have represented there?
Absolutely. Hi, Susan.
Hi.
We have actually a room full. So I have Family Resource Centers representative. I have First 5 Mendocino representative. I have a number of early start representative. I have Regional Center, a contractual agent that works with our 0 to 3 representative. I have a lot of early start. I have a long-time midwife, nurse, and now she's a school nurse, but I'm going to give her credit for all the other stuff. I also have partnership and health plan in the room. And then I am from a cause organization. Did I forget anybody? Excellent. Thank you, Susan.
Thank you, Sharon. That's great. County of Lake, Doreen, could you give us a rundown, a general snapshot of what organizations you have the room there?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
We have public health, we have partnership, we have Lake Park District, Identitel, the County Child Welfare Services, Easterfield, we have Lake County Tribal Health Consortium, More Public Health, LCRE, we have Lake County Behavioral Health, and Lake County Social Services. And that's
Redwood Community Services.
oh, and we have family agency too.
Is that it, Doreen?
Yeah.
Thank you so very much. That sounds like a good group there. In fact, we had about 90 people registered among all of the sites. So we've got a good crew of people that are joining us today, and we're very excited about that. Okay, Dora in Humboldt. Could we hear the organizations you have in your room?
Can you hear me, Susan?
Yes, I can, loud and clear. Thank you.
Awesome. Okay, so we have First 5 Humboldt, Changing Tides Family Services, City of Arcata Recreation, additional First 5, and it looks like possibly a Child Abuse Prevention Coordinating Council member.
Fantastic. How about Changing Tides? Okay. I think their location is at Changing Tides. So how about the County of Siskiyou? Is Shasta there? Okay. Okay. So we'll wait a minute to see whether we get connected. That's one of the beauties of the technology, is that we can all be connected across the region, but sometimes there are little glitches that come up too, and we have to work on those things. And thankfully, we've got Bryn to do that. And then we have the online folks. Are you able to see, Bryn?
I can.
But you're trying to do something else at the same time.
Sorry. I know we did have one person write in, which was very helpful. Sarah Costa wrote in from Redwood Coast Regional Center in Mendocino County.
Good.
Yeah, so.
I know we had a good representation as I looked at the online list, and I don't want to not pay attention to our online group, because we've got a pretty good number of folks joining us online, and they're coming from different counties around our northern region. The northern region encompasses 12 counties, and so we just want to acknowledge that we have a good showing across those counties. And did you find Shasta yet?
I have Michelle.
Oh, Michelle.
Online, I accidentally muted her.
Okay, now try.
Yeah. Hello.
Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Hi. Yes.
Hi.
You
We're
want to
here.
tell us who's in your room?
So we have Remy Vista here and First Five Siskiyou.
Great. Now, who am I speaking to? Because
I'm
Shasta.
Shasta.
You're Shasta?
Yes.
Oh, good, Shasta. I know you were out of the office not feeling well.
Yeah,
So
I'm back today. So
fantastic,
something to
fantastic.
technology.
Good. Thank you for joining us. Okay, so that gives us a sense of who we have that's joining us today. And I'm going to just go quickly through some introductory slides before we get to Barbara's actual presentation. So Strategies is funded by the Office of Child Abuse Prevention, and we definitely want to acknowledge their support in what Strategies is doing. The mission of Strategies is to be a catalyst for the professional skills, organizational structure, and community relationships necessary to mitigate the risk factors for child abuse and neglect, and to promote child, family, and community well-being. And as we're looking at a vision for this particular series, we're looking at identifying and shaping common language and practice around early childhood mental health and resiliency within communities and the northern region. So we have an exciting opportunity to do some shaping together of what we'd like to see, not only in our own communities, but in the region. This is the Strategies 2.0 menu of services. They offer training, they offer consulting, and they offer learning communities, which we are a part of today. This is a way that you can participate, newsletter, trainings, and registering for learning communities. This is what learning communities have an opportunity to do, really building cross-sector partnerships. And I think in every one of your rooms, all of those who are participating, you've got a cross-sector group, and some of you are already working together, and some of you maybe will find that there's somebody else in the room that maybe you hadn't connected with already, and it gives you an opportunity to network that way and to build your organizational capacity to solve pressing problems. We're here because building resiliency is multifaceted, it's complex, it's not something that's going to be done in a day, but it's something that if we work together, we have a chance to be able to increase impact. One of the things that Strategies really values is evaluation and outcomes, and this just a little snapshot. At the end of each season, these learning community seasons, they do a poll or a survey. And the last one that was done, this may not be the most recent one, but there was a 10% response rate from across all of the 6 regions in the state of California, which was a good representation, and 84% of the people said that they had gained or implemented skills, tools, or knowledge. And you can see in the little bubble a comment by one of the participants. So at the end of each one of these sessions, there will be an evaluation, and that's where we learn about this as we're going through the various series. This is a way that you can participate on social media, photographs, hashtag NorthernLC or hashtag topic. And at the end of our last cycle of learning communities, I did a short little poll just to get a sense of what was happening in the northern region. And we really take that feedback seriously, and we tried to look at what we were going to do next, and that's how we happened into this 4-part series based on the input that we got from that poll. So we asked, what do you feel really needs immediate attention in your community and across the region? And as you can see, what popped up was increasing knowledge, skills, and best practices among the service providers, and really trying to align those skills and best practices across the service providers, and then working with decision makers around policy. And so these are some of the things that we're going to build in to this series. And the other question that I asked was where more support was needed. in terms of achieving what needs attention. And one of the things that came through very strongly was bringing the public more fully into the work that we're doing around trauma-informed prevention and resiliency building. So we will get to those points as we are going through the series. And we have Barbara Ivins with us, and I have given her a little snippet of an introduction. I'll let her say more about herself. This is the agenda for today. We've been through the welcome and introductions. We are moving into the presentation. And at the end, we always have a time where we look at reflections and observations and kind of get input for how we can move from here into our next session and then evaluation. And this is the objective for our learning community today. Barbara will be talking about core principles and practices spanning the continuum of care, which we're looking at as promotion, prevention, intervention, treatment, and policy. And then she will have an assessment, I think, as part of each part of the series, right? Yeah. A self-assessment and identify what's needed to implement these early childhood mental health principles in practice. And this is a really exciting collaboration that we have between UCSF and Strategies in terms of going upstream to look at early childhood mental health and what we can do to make a difference. And I know that many of you in this room are strong partners already. Barbara has been going through these various counties and she's been meeting with people and meeting with collaborations. And I know First Five has been a very strong partner and we're in First Five office today. And thank you, Wendy, for allowing us to use your space. And so this is a neat opportunity. The really beautiful thing is that Barbara's project is regional. And our strategies project is regional. And the counties that we're working on are almost identical. So we really looked at the fact that if we could bring our work together, we might really be able to shape something together, by the time we get to the end of this series. And that's the difference between a learning community and a training. A training gives you information, and of course you go out and you go back to your organization and you apply those things. But what we're really looking for is, could we shape something together as a result of the information that we're sharing that could make a difference not only in your community, but in the region as well. Perhaps it's a statement that we want to make a declaration in some way about early childhood mental health, and it's something that we could say throughout our region. Perhaps it's a practice that as we're going through this together, it'll be something that percolates up and resonates for everyone and says, this is something that if we did this together, we could really increase our impact. So we're going into this completely open as to, what might come out at the end in what we would shape together. So that's an exciting opportunity, and I really appreciate everybody participating and being a part of this. And this is your survey. So Barbara, if you want to say anything about that, I think that your presentation follows this.
Okay, great. Good afternoon, everybody. And I want to, can you hear me? Am I coming through okay? And if you can't hear me, would you please let me know? Because I'm often told that I don't project my voice well. So Bryn has me covered over here for you remote people, but the people in the room, please let me know. So I'm really happy to be here, and I want to do a shout out to all of the counties that are with us and also to those of you at home, because the real theme of the presentation really for the year is about relationships. So I want to make sure that we do everything we can to really cement the relationships that we have. And I'm going to try my hardest to stay connected to those of you in the room, those of you in other counties, and those of you at home. I want to start by acknowledging my co-director, Miriam, who's in the room. Please come up here and show yourself to the camera for those people. And you will see her picture. Miriam and I are co-directors of this project. And we come as a set of, there it is. We come as a team, and we will be visiting you and your communities throughout a 5-year grant, which I will tell you about shortly. On your screen, you will see today's pre-training survey. And I think for us, we are a workforce development project, and we care very deeply about whether what we do matters at all. And so we need you as partners in this endeavor to help us learn from you and with you about whether things make a difference. And to that end, this is today's pre-survey link. For those of you in other counties that are at home, if you're at home, you have a link that will put you right into our database. For those of you with paper and pencil surveys, please remember the identifier at the top, last 2 initials of your mother's maiden name, last 4 digits of your phone number, and that will help us identify your pre and post learning. So I appreciate that. And I will come back to that. So I'm going to start today with the take-home message, of which there are a few. So basically, I'm going to shortcut to that. And you have many things in a packet of handouts or online if you have it online, all of which will cover everything and more that I'm going to talk about today, so that you can just sit here and be with us in the room today. And don't worry about this. I've given you more PowerPoint slides than we have time for. I've given you things to read if you like to read. I've given some other links. So you have all of that to take with you, and please use those materials as you see fit. But the take-home messages today are pretty clear and straightforward. So we're here together regionally and as part of a community to create this common language and understanding of what infant and early childhood mental health really means. And for some of you, this may be a review, and for some of you, this may be the start of a language that we hope we can all share, because when we share a common language and a set of ideas, we work together more effectively on behalf of young children and families. And that is very much an important part. And I will spend some time this morning talking again about why the first 3 years and creating a mental wellness approach really matters for everything that happens afterwards in development and in families. So very, very important. Secondly, we want all of you, it's kind of great to hear who's represented in our learning collaborative. We want all of you to think of yourselves as part of the infant and early childhood mental health workforce. So I personally come from a treatment program at Children's Hospital in Oakland, and we on the Care Continuum are on the treatment end, meaning we are seeing children who have identified challenges and problems that people think really require a specialized mental health treatment. But we do an awful lot of prevention as well, and we have to work a little more on the promotion side. But I want you to be thinking today about where are you on that care continuum, and we'll take some time to talk about it and have some examples. But basically, there are ways to think of yourselves that if you are promoting social emotional well-being in infants, and we're going to talk about how all of you are doing that and can do it, then you're on that care continuum with us, and we want you to think about where you are. And that can look like screening that you do and making that screening a door to a conversation and really helping that identify when kids need to be referred. There are lots of different ways that you can kind of do this. And so we want to encourage that over the course of this year, that we think of ourselves as a workforce across the care continuum, with every part of that workforce being vital to really promoting health and development in young kids. And finally, kind of our big take-home message right here is that we're really emphasizing the centrality of relationships. And by that, we're going to mean, and I will repeat myself in many ways, because I kind of believe in repetition. I need it a lot myself. Not just the relationship between parents and children or caregivers and children, but also the relationship between you and parents. And we're going to really push home this idea that we work as a kind of parallel process, and that when you are working with parents and the way you are and how you treat parents really is a parallel to how we're really thinking that we want parents to treat children. So here's the kind of take-home message of the day at the beginning, which is that you and your relationship with the family are the most important tool in your toolbox, no matter where you are. And you are in lots of different agencies. And I want you to be thinking about that really throughout the year, but we'll start today. And finally, isn't this a great drawing? We were in Humboldt a few weeks ago doing a training, and somebody in the room, Amber, was a mosaic artist and made this beautiful drawing as we were speaking and took this phrase, how you are is as important as what you do, which we're going to unpack a little bit, and made this beautiful drawing and inspired us to think about a coloring book of phrases that we can design. But I think this is a beautiful message and one of our take-home messages today. So relationships matter. How you are as important as what you do. And if we had more time, I would stop at this point and ask you to say hello to somebody in the room that you don't know. So I want you to think about that. And when we do break, please, and we're talking, please put yourself in a group with people you don't know so that you can meet each other and we can build our connections and relationships. Okay, why am I standing up here? And it could be Miriam and I together. Why are we doing this? So this is where I tell you about our grant. This year, SAMHSA, which is the Substance Abuse Mental Health Association, put out its first funding, legislated money that was specifically for infancy and early childhood mental health. We applied for this grant along with many other people in the country, and 9 of these grants were awarded. So there were 2 reasons that we applied. One is that we represent a set of 3 programs in the Bay Area, in San Francisco and in Oakland across the Bay, that are early childhood mental health programs that have been around for 30 years, doing treatment, doing training, and seeding our own communities with a workforce that really can serve this population. And we saw this grant as an opportunity to come together ourselves as a consortium and share what we know and really infuse that elsewhere. And the second part of that was that we didn't want to infuse it where we are, because we feel like we have a lot of services and we haven't quite saturated the community, but we have built a workforce. So we wanted to look at where we thought the need was high and the workforce was lower. And we had connections with the First 5 Northwest Association, and they are themselves a group that includes 11 of the 12 counties that are a part of strategies. And so we partnered with them because First 5, and a shout out to First 5 in all counties, First 5 really has as their mandate to serve young kids birth to 5. And they have on their commission and they have in their projects bringing kind of cross-sector people together on behalf of young children. And they are really ideal partners for us because with them at our side in a collaboration, we really kind of enter communities where we're really not known. And we want to be very mindful and respectful that we need to partner with you. We're coming from an urban hub to our rural county northern neighbors and really trying to learn from you about what your communities and counties have in common, of which you guys are teaching us so much now, and how we can bring what we've learned over 30 years about early childhood mental health to you, and together create a really strong workforce to serve communities. So we were really excited about this, and this is a workforce development grant for us. And then we got funded. So it was like, oh my goodness, we're on our way. So Miriam and I are kind of the on the ground frontline people who are there. And this is a very complicated, but I like it, graphic about what our project is. And so if you can see this on your PowerPoint handout, which you may not be able to easily, over on the left are our benchmarks for our program and what we think of as an early childhood mental health informed system. And you will see there things that we will be talking about over the course of the year. What does it mean to be developmentally informed? Meaning we want people in the workforce who really understand what a 3-month-old looks like and what a 1-year-old looks like and what a 3-year-old looks like, because the challenges and the behaviors that we see that are worrisome to us or that we want to support look different at those ages, and how they manifest as symptoms in children look different. So we want to shore up that idea that people have good developmental understanding, and it informs how we intervene. To be relationship based, you're going to hear me hammer that home over and over and over again, meaning that how you are and the relationship you form with families is a powerful, powerful intervention. And whether you're working at the WIC office or the Family Resource Center, or you're part of Nurse Family Partnership, or you're an infant development specialist, wherever you are, that relationship is going to be a pivotal tool. The fact of being trauma and resilience informed, I think that trauma, we know that our communities are impacted by trauma, and the incredible kind of psychoeducation that the ACEs project have done. I'm assuming that people know the ACEs, is that right? Because I feel they've been out there really educating people about that. So we know that trauma is way more prevalent than we might have realized, and prevalent also in young kids. So we want to know not only what that looks like, but what protective factors are that balance out those risk factors and how we really think about building resilience in a community. Very important to kind of everybody. Reflective practice is something that I'm not sure that people make time or do that, but I love that strategies as part of their own collaboration, and why they make a really great partner for us is not just bringing the whole region together and creating something innovative out of our ideas in the room, but also creating a time for reflection and really making a moment to sit and think about. Today it's going to be a set of ideas, but I think in your work it can be reflecting on how am I feeling in this moment and what's happening right now and what should I be saying or could I be saying, or oh my goodness, what did I say? And how do I really make a space and a time and within a relationship have a place to really reflect on my work, which is really, really important. Cultural sensitivity, I think we all know that there's the culture of families and the culture of ethnicity and communities and all of that way, and that no two families are really alike, and that we have to enter families and work with families and communities by really understanding family practices, individual rituals, where people come from, and how culture informs this lens of expectation that we all develop about what happens. And finally, collaborative. And so we exist as a collaboration in the room, and we want to also think of collaboration is also about the fact that all of our work is collaborative with parents. They are the experts on their children, and we join them and to collaborate on really understanding how we can be helpful. And then we as people across different sectors come together to help as well. So in yellow here are the activities that are really happening as a result of this great collaboration with strategies. One of the beauties and joys of this grant for us has been that we have come into counties and kind of in a serendipitous way run into things that are happening and just really align together. And so strategies for us is a great collaborator because we have a lot of positive things in mind together that really coalesce. So we're happy to be kind of doing all of that. So this kind of gives you a bigger picture of our grant. And these are our people. I'm sorry that looks so dark, but this is our team of people. And so today and the 4 sessions that make up this learning collaborative are only for us an introduction to you. And I say this from the heart and from the mind that we have a variety of trainings that we can offer in your communities. You have them in your handouts. There's a menu of training options, and that we are available to you to come to your program, to your collaborations, to your county. And we are also available for consultation. And so when I put my email on the front of this, and Miriam and I can send you this, we encourage you to contact us. It's not a false promise. Please contact us because together we can kind of infuse this. So here are the variety of people you may see, and we may be showing up in your communities here. So I want to acknowledge all of them. They're all fantastic people, and this is our consortium. Okay, what we're going to do in the first part of this, and I'm going to breeze through this because I've packed in way more than we can possibly do today, but we'll see just what that stimulates for your thinking. I want to start with 2 different things. First of all, what a definition is, a common definition of what do we really mean by infant and early childhood mental health, and then what do we mean by a care continuum. So give me a little time to go through number 1, and then we're going to come back to number 2. So here's a definition of infant mental health. This happens to be one that's from the 0 to 3 Infant Mental Health Task Force. So 0 to 3, do you guys know 0 to 3, the national organization? Very big holder of training and policy, and their national conference is coming up, if any of you are going, which is in Florida this year. So here's a definition: the capacity of children from birth to age 5 to experience, regulate, and express emotions, to form close and secure relationships, and explore the environment and learn. And the reason it's important to have a definition is because just the fact that mental health is in the term already takes us down a path that leads in the direction of thinking about what's wrong, thinking about pathology, or something that's not going well. And I think we need to take the time to think of infant and early childhood mental health from a preventive point of view, going farther upstream in terms of what does mental wellness look like and emotional well-being look like. And that's what we mean by early childhood mental health. What do we do that really creates emotional well-being in young children, and use that definition. We have another definition that we kind of like ourselves, which is the thoughts, feelings, and expectations one develops about the self, and the thoughts, feelings, and expectations one develops towards others and the world. And the reason that we like this one, I think, in addition, is because this talks a little more about your insides. So it's not really just about how you are and what you do. It's about what's going on inside, and how do you develop those insides? How does a little baby and a young child develop their sense of self? And how do they come to develop their own lens of expectation about the world? How am I received in the world? How does the world treat me? And that you can see that your experiences, which for babies happen in the context of relationships, are very, very much colored by the relationships that they have, how they're perceived, how they experience things, the quality with which those relationships are experienced by babies become, in a moment-to-moment way, a lens of expectation that they carry into the world. And that's why this idea of thoughts and feelings and expectations about oneself and others feels like a really important part of the definition of early childhood mental health. Does that make sense, people? Okay. So let's think about what indicators are there when we have emotional well-being. And I'm going to read you the list that was generated from Humboldt County. Shout out to Humboldt County today. When we were there a few weeks ago talking to Head Start providers. So we did some training with the Head Start system in Humboldt County, and we asked them this question: what are the indicators of a presence of emotional well-being for all of us? And this is a list that that they came up with. They said, okay, when you're in a good state of emotional well-being, the thoughts that you have about yourself and others may be acceptance. I accept myself the way I am, and I accept others. Taking things at face value and not taking them personally. Being open-minded to learn. Empathy. Being curious, calm, self-aware. Having the capacity to soothe oneself, which I liked, kind of self-regulation, and then there's co-regulation. The capacity to mirror, be optimistic. I can have an effect on those around me. I'm optimistic about others and their intentions. I'm confident about handling conflict. And then we thought, well, what allows us to really handle conflict? And it's really trusting yourself to enter into a set of feelings that actually may not feel so good, to be able to tolerate anger or disappointment and really experience the range of emotions. Somebody in the room made this kind of metaphor of, where are you on the keyboard? You know, are you on the piano keyboard? Are you in the high notes? Are you in the low notes? And how is it that we experience that full range of emotions and be able to kind of traverse all of that? And so what you need to tolerate that range of emotion is to really understand that the negative parts, disappointment doesn't last a lifetime. It lasts a moment. And you can tolerate those feelings until you get through it. So as we think about this, what creates emotional well-being for us, and we start thinking about how do we create that for young children, isn't this what we want for our kids in terms of mental wellness, is to really create that? So I kind of like the list that they generated, because you can see that really creating that set of qualities starts at day one. And that it's in every interaction that you have. That's really kind of what's shaped about it. So these lenses of expectation are drawn from experience. So I gave Susan this example earlier today that's kind of silly, but I've been thinking about it a lot. So I've been doing a lot of traveling, and means that I'm in airports with the experience of TSA. And in at least San Francisco and Oakland, where I leave from the most, I'm having this experience of feeling like I'm part of a herd that comes through, and people are saying to me, shoes off, whatever, they're yelling this, and they're, that's everybody's taking their things apart. And then I was in Eugene, Oregon last week where I got stuck, and I went through TSA, and the TSA agent looked me in the eye and said, good morning, how are you today? And I was like, fine, how are you? And he said, I'm great, and I'm all the better from having met you today. And I have to tell you that what stuns me is that this man is still in my head. And I think, why is this person in my head? And it's because I've developed a lens of expectation about TSA and going through airport security. And he violated my lens. He violated my lens of expectation. And I really thought, oh my goodness, I had a moment of regard with this TSA agent who was smiling and optimistic and personal. And it was, 30 seconds? And he's still in my head. So it really spoke to me about the power both of a lens of expectation and also of a relationship, because even the TSA people need to be relationship based, and that would really change all of our experiences. So, so that's what we think of when we think of emotional well-being. As a result of those positive things and those moment-to-moment interactions, this is what we think of as an indicator of good mental health and wellness. The capacity to trust, the capacity to relate, to take pleasure in ourselves and others, and to feel effective and really have the expectation of that. Does that make sense? And I want you to think about, like take a moment and think about a baby, a family you've worked with. Doesn't have to be a baby, a young child. And I want you to hold them in mind as we talk for the rest of the morning and really be thinking about, do they have this? What's their lens of expectation and experience? What is their experience in the world? And what does it mean to create early a very positive view, or really have distortions or difficulties that create a different kind of lens? So development, as we know it, is dynamic. We know that it's not a static thing, and that those primary relationships become really important and affect all domains of relationships. So social emotional development and relationships are kind of the context in which all of development unfolds. So if you're somebody who really is an intervener in developmental capacity of young children, you know this really well, even while you're thinking about language development and cognitive development and motor development. All of those domains of development are shaped really through this, and development is always, always changing. So again, we think of this happens from the beginning. The sense of self starts from those moment-to-moment interactions. They are developed in relationships, and we accumulate a lens of expectation. Is that right? So you're thinking of that baby, you're holding that baby in mind and thinking about what happens. So babies are really fantastic partners for us, and they come into the world kind of literally seeking sociality. And just as a brief reminder, as a little plug for development in this talk today, we kind of remember that in a sensory way, babies are really tuned into relational capacities. So we know that their sight, a newborn baby, what they can see is really related to that distance between when you be holding a baby and where the face is. And that they're organized in a way where they're really pretty interested in things that look like a face as opposed to things that really don't. We know in terms of their hearing that motherese, everybody has a little motherese moment in their mind, and you find yourself using it with small babies and little animals and all sorts of things, where suddenly your voice goes up a register and you have this kind of, oh, you're so cute. Why do we do that? It's like we're primed, all of us, to kind of have that hook and that kind of relationship. And it's true for all of the sensory capacities of babies and their capacity to kind of integrate those senses. It's all pretty much pre-wiring for sociality. So it both pulls us in to kind of caring for them, and it also is one that really kind of enhances their own experience. So it's kind of a great kind of system. And we also know that every baby is different. So at the same time that babies all are born with a pretty good set of reflexes and sensory capacities that really support sociality, we also know that babies have different temperaments and that we come into the world constitutionally as different people with different capacities. So some babies love to be swapped. Do people in here have children? Do you have children? More than one children? I'm always reminded of this because I feel like this is the part of the transactional nature of relationships, is that you're not the same parent to more than one child, in part because each of those children are different. So your first baby may love to be held and swaddled and cuddled, and your second child may be like this, too much. And you have to figure that out, and the baby figures it out too. And what really makes that happen is the capacity to read those baby signals and understand what's happening, to not take it overly personally if you have a baby who really can't handle that, and to have a lens of understanding for that. So the world is experienced differently by all of us, and we all feel it too in terms of who we are. So what meaning we make of those constitutional differences can set a relationship off in a positive way, or can set a relationship off in a negative way. And this is, again, one direction where all of you have the capacity to be in those relationships, notice those kinds of things, and really change the trajectory of how a relationship is unfolding just by those kinds of things, the knowledge that you have and how you see, say, constitutional differences in children. So again, they do affect how babies experience the world. They do affect how the baby is experienced by a caregiver or a parent. I was with a family a few weeks ago, and this child, who's more 2.5, so we're in a different developmental stage, was really going through what I thought of separation individuation. Have you heard that term? The kind of Margaret Mahler phases, really two-ish in a striving for independence and a kind of rapprochement, needing dependency, striving for independence. And it was manifesting in all sorts of ways, which included rejecting his mother. So I don't want to go home with you when you pick me up at daycare. I don't want to sleep in your bed. I want to sleep in somebody else's bed. I don't want you here when I take my bath, you know. And the mother was devastated. I mean, she was just devastated because she took that rejection in such a personal way. And she really needed to slow down and try and have a different frame for understanding what's happening with him. Is it just developmental? Is something else happening in the household? What's happening with this particular child? And there was a moment of meaning making, which isn't just one moment, it's many moments to try and unpack and understand that. But at least part of it was, who's this child? And how's he experiencing the world and what's happening there? So think of that baby in your mind and think, how do I think of that child constitutionally? How is this baby I'm thinking about different from other babies? And what do I notice about how they experience the world, how they experience me, how they experience their other caregivers? We also know that caregivers contribute to relational quality. So babies are not the only ones that come into the world with constitutional differences and have a moment by moment experience that shapes their lens, but adults do too. So adults are way farther along on the continuum of having created a lens of expectation about themselves, about children, their children, about helpers and service providers. So we know that all of these things are really related to how a parent may be experiencing not only their child, but experiencing us when we show up. And so it's really important to think about that part too. Who's the parent who's sitting in front of me? What are they bringing to this encounter? How do I have to take that into consideration when I use myself and my relationship in trying to help them, depending on what your role is? And that becomes really, really pivotal. If you are working with a parent who has really felt like people have not been helpful in the past, and that lens of expectation, I think it really matters. I have this teenager that lives in my head from many, many years ago, because I spent a lot of time wooing her in my field that was called wooing, meaning they would cancel and she wouldn't show up. And instead, it was kind of in an era where we had the luxury of making meaning of what it meant for somebody to not show up, as opposed to now where I feel like there's a lot of pressure to say 3 no-shows, I'm crossing you off the list. Okay, it was a different era. And we spent a lot of time thinking about it. So I finally wooed my way in. I tolerated a lot of not showing up, not being there, and I would show up and I'd knock on the door and I'd leave a note, sorry I missed you, I'll try calling you again. Well, eventually I got in. I got in, and I was in the house with this teenager a number of months later when somebody else tried to come, okay, and like somebody from another program had tried to make an appointment. And this is what happened. She was upstairs in her bedroom watching that person from the window. Now I'm on the inside. I'm on the inside now, and I'm in the house with her thinking, oh, wow, this must be what was happening with me. And she was watching this person come and waiting to see what they did. And we were able to have a conversation about, wow, what happened here? Now remember, she's a teenager. Well, she had somebody before me in her list of people who come to intervene with teenagers who've had babies, who knocked on the door and actually tried the door and walked in, and the door was unlocked. Somebody who literally nobody answered the door, and she tried the door and walked in. Well, believe me, that was enough for this young woman to say, I don't trust anybody. So her experiences, and so all of my rejections of no-shows and her not coming to the door was kind of a test in retrospect of what am I going to do, and am I going to hang in there, and am I going to try the door, am I going to, and I guess I passed the test, but then I watched her now, how it manifested with the next person, meaning it was kind of an interesting thing. So I feel like, again, we all have to be thinking about that. So what we know is that development occurs as a transaction, meaning the baby that I have with those constitutional issues and experiences and the mother that I am with everything I bring affect each other in this very dynamic interplay. So the baby shapes me and I shape the baby. And that is why, in a way, I'm not the same mother at all to my 2 sons who are now grown. But my experience of mothering and their experience of me as a mother is completely different. And when I hear people make a comment like, my kids are so different, but they grew up in the same family, I always think to myself, no, they did not. It may look like the same people, but in fact, what's pulled out of us is so different based on the child that we have. And so we really are, and that's what transaction really, really means. And it really just shapes each other. If I have a fussy baby, a baby who really has trouble with regulation, and if anyone's had a fussy baby, you know how difficult that can be. It's really, really hard not to develop a set of expectation that I'm doing something wrong, I can't help my baby calm down, I can't help my baby feed, wait, maybe something's wrong with my baby, wait, maybe I should go to the doctor and see something's wrong, oh, maybe I have a vulnerable baby. Okay, maybe it's just a phase and the baby will get out of it, but you can see how this experience can shape not only who I am as a worried parent, but how I view my child as, say, a sickly child or a difficult child or something like that. So those things are what we think of as transactions. It's always a dynamic interplay of shaping each other. Do people get that? Are you feeling that in your relationships in your head with babies? Are you feeling that in our other counties and people at home? I want to connect with you and know that you're with us, because I get to look at these people here in Reading in the eye, but I'm not seeing you guys. So I want to make sure you're there. So nod in the rooms where you are. That's good. Okay. So we're going to take some time to look at 2 videotapes and together. And I'm counting on Bryn to say, yes, this will work everywhere. So wherever you are, you're going to see these tapes together. And I want to thank YouTube for being a platform where people just put things up there. And now we get to think about them together. So as we watch these 2 very, very different encounters, I want you to be thinking about these questions. What thoughts, feelings, and attributions about this self would this baby have to internalize? or this child, these are not babies, they're a little older than babies. And how are these encounters shaping the child's experience about the world that, again, they internalize as a moment-to-moment encounter. Okay, so let's see, Bryn, how this works. So some of you may have seen this fantastic. Have you seen this? And if you've seen it, just enjoy it again. This is a father and son, which is kind of an amazing encounter of them together watching something on television. So let's see if we can get this going.
1 second, let me,
Oh, sound.
Yep, let me
Hold on.
make sure the computer's up to the spot. Just a moment. Sorry about this. That's not where we're going. Sorry about that.
I'm so glad this is Bryn and not me.
So is there headphones plugged in, which there definitely are not. Sorry. Oh, perfect. That helps. Okay.
Okay, ready again?
Yeah. Perfect.
They need to work on that, right? Yes. Did you understand it though? No. All right. Go up. Oh, not this one. This one. Yeah, this last one. That's what I was wondering. I don't know what they're gonna do next season, but they did some stuff this time. Exactly what I was thinking. Oh yeah, yeah. Right. Don't bring that in. You know what I'm saying? Don't do the same stuff. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, I like that. Yeah. Like go somewhere else with that. Don't bring here. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. That's what I'm saying. They did like, you know what I'm saying? I was like, what in the world? Don't do it here. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Yeah. Really? I thought the same thing. We think a lot alike, huh? Oh, that's crazy. Right.
So I just want to ask, like I'll ask the people in this room, tell me what you think when you see this. What happens? Just shout out something. What do you notice? Engagement. Okay, what else? Conversation. Happiness. Connection. This encounter to me, like I can barely understand anything and I don't need to, which is so beautiful. It's such a beautiful jargoning. And what is that child, that baby internalizing about his world and himself? Like, what do you think he's learning in this encounter? Confidence? What he says matters. You know, this dad is amazing at mirroring. Like that idea of how you mirror, he does such an incredible job of really attending to this child. And what's so great about this from my perspective is they're watching something on TV. And we always think of screen time. We're thinking a lot about screen time these days and how much screen time people have. But here's a really beautiful example of screen time as a relational event. That this dad is really, they're kind of focused here, but they're also focused on each other, and how kind of beautiful that is. It's really, it makes me smile when I see it. And he's been interviewed. I think he's a comedian or something. He's an actor or comedian, and he has been interviewed. And there are a couple of other encounters I've seen him do, which are really great. And he did this kind of spontaneously, but it's such a beautiful example of what do we think this child gets to internalize in this relationship. Okay, let's watch another one. Oops.
I got it.
Thank you, Bryn. Okay, Same questions. What is this child learning from this encounter? Okay, so that's about the same length as the last one that we watched, actually a little less. So when you see this encounter, what happens for you? What are you thinking? What are you feeling? What comes up? Makes you angry? It feels like mistreatment? Okay. Anything? He could be following through on a, like, I'm not going to let him have the soda, and the child's having a fit, and he's just sticking firm.
But then he doesn't necessarily have appropriate developmental expectations.
His developmental expectations may be off in terms of what's manageable.
Perhaps he's putting his needs first, like he wants to do what he's doing, which he knows is more important than
Yeah.
what the child needed at that time.
Part of what I actually love about this clip is which is hard to see. And if we had a little more time, we could go through this way more slowly and look at the dad or the man. We don't even know really if it's the dad and the child, and really look. But this child's capacity at the end to go turn on the TV, like here's the screen. Really, to me, what I think, wow, look what the child's trying to do to manage himself in this moment. That even though he's in great distress, we're seeing some strength here in terms of the child's capacities. What is this child learning about himself and the world in relationships? It feels like his needs don't matter.
He's trying to communicate something, but it doesn't matter.
He's trying to communicate something, but he's not being understood. People aren't listening. Can you feel in watching these two clips this idea of a lens of expectation? That a young child and a baby has way less of a scaffold on which to hang their experience. And those experiences are created in a minute by minute kind of encounter. So how your diaper is changed, how your bottle is prepared, how you're greeted when somebody comes home, how you follow through on the kind of limits that you set, all of those create a kind of context in which young children grow up to understand the world in the context. That's what we mean in the context of relationships. They're pretty powerless in the world, and things happen to them, and how those things happen really become the worldview. And that's what we mean by early childhood mental health, very much so. Okay. Take a breath, and we're going to change topics for a moment. So you're going to hold that, because I'm going to ask you a question in a few minutes about where you are on the care continuum and how you are doing something now in your work that supports the social emotional development of young kids. So all of this definition about what is early childhood mental health, how do we define it, how do we create a lens of expectation, how do we support social emotional development, how do I do it in my work, all of this is the precursor to what are you doing in the work that you currently do in order to support a positive lens of expectation in those relationships. Does that make sense? Okay, what do we mean by a care continuum? Okay, promotion is the broadest, most flexible, appeals to everybody, informational, pepper the community with that. When I think of promotion, and it's kind of a public health term, and I think of it as a bit of an approach that way, I think of the things that we see on billboards and bus stops and the sides of buses, and that I actually saw in the restroom here at First Five. I was looking at these things framed on the thing, the handouts that are on the table when you walk in. And here are examples of how people use promotion. And I want to say this because you can see that some of them, like up there in the postnatal depression, where we're worried about perinatal mood disorders, and maybe we want to educate a population about what are the risks of depression, okay, for a pregnant mom, contain a lot of information on a poster, but it's self-experienced. I can read it in the waiting room, I can kind of see it. And you can see that Healthy Childhoods Last a Lifetime, the Talk, Read, Sing kind of campaign is a really great example of a promotional campaign. You can just have 3 words on there, and you can put books out and have that poster, and that's kind of promotional. But I also want you to pay attention to just the photographs up there, because these pictures of mothers and babies and then young children convey a feeling in you about what a relationship looks like and can feel like. And that picture of the child with his dad, with her dad, is really another good example of really, if I have that picture up in my program, I'm conveying a lot of things, not just about the relationship, but the dads are important. I have a picture of a father and a child hanging up, and not just mothers and children. And so all of us, this is somewhere where I've had to work in my program. Again, I'm on the treatment end, and I have to think, I have families coming into my program, and so what's on the walls? And what's in a waiting area, and what is it that I can do to actually use promotion to really support social emotional health. And I'm a big proponent right now of photographs, because I feel that, I don't know, people have Facebook and all of that, but I've been stunned at the number of families. I've worked a lot with children, families in the child welfare system, and they actually don't have a lot of pictures of themselves and their children, and what it means to capture a moment of a parent, a positive picture of a parent and a child together, and really give that to them as something. To have pictures like this, photographs up, not just information, but just pictures that kind of get into your mind about what a good relationship really looks like. So I want to put a pitch in for promotion, and many of you are probably kind of there. This is from 0 to 3, that national organization, and you can see that this is their definition of, and I call this a promotional kind of poster in a way, their definition about what early childhood mental health really is, and then that kind of sense of where we can promote social and emotional well-being, and their little icons that touched really every sector that interfaces with young children and families. And you can see many on there that you represent, and some on there that you may not, like the judicial system. But the fact is, we all are on that continuum of touching where young children and families are and creating that lens. And so this to me feels like another kind of good promotional thing. So when we think of preventive intervention, I've got some examples up here. The ones in red are the ones on our grant, where we can offer you additional training and support. So I've listed those up there, but what we think of as preventive intervention right now may include things like screening, and I'm assuming that many of you do screening. And we're going to really focus on screening in our next Learning Collaborative a little more. We're going to talk about risk factors and preventive, protective factors and screening and other kinds of things. And, you know, the fact is most systems require you to do kind of screening. But my pitch to you is going to be, they're screening and they're screening. They're screening as paperwork, and they're screening as an entry for referral to services, and they're screening as an intervention, which is opening a door to a conversation with parents. And we'll be talking about that next time. There's also parenting programs and playgroups, and I'm imagining a lot of people in the room have been part of that or refer to that, because I'm going to show you some posters from your communities that really teach me about that. You may be part of a family resource center or WIC program. You may be a home visitor. So all of these we'd put on the care continuum as prevention, meaning you're in there doing some things. You're doing interventions. It doesn't mean you're not intervening, but you are the basic first responders. You're the people on the ground who really are seeing children and families and really being able to identify what may happen. And it's one of the things I feel like we've learned by coming to more rural communities from our urban hub. In our urban hub, it feels to me like the medical providers, the medical home is our first responders. The people really use the medical system as an entry point, but I'm not sure that's completely true in rural communities. And I feel like those of you who are home visiting, who are part of the Head Start system, who are part of the regional center, county office of it, like you're the first responders in some ways. And I feel like that's vitally important. And so you are really important in terms of doing prevention and thinking of that preventive intervention. Your child find, and you're in the place of being able to offer information and guidance. We're going to talk about this after our little networking session today of how you do what you do. So as an example of a preventive intervention around developmental guidance, let's look at the example where you're in a home and you feel like a baby's in a car seat too much. Mother's doing stuff and they got the child in the car seat. So a typical kind of psychoeducational intervention might look something like this. I noticed the baby's in her car seat a lot. Babies need a lot of interaction with their parents, including being talked to. Why don't you try and pick her up and maybe talk to her about things that are in the room? So it might be a kind of suggestion of an activity. Okay, so I want you to think about that and think about doing it this way. I notice how the baby lights up when you look at her and come close. I can see what an important person you are to her. She seems to really notice your voice when she hears you talking. I can see her moving her legs and following you with her eyes. So we're going to come back to this. Like one of them is like, here's the information and here's something to do. The other is like, wow, you're a really important person in this baby's life. It's a little, you see why one is what I'd call didactic, giving you information. One's a little more non-didactic, wondering out loud. So people who are in the prevention business and in the intervention have a lot of opportunities like this to kind of create a context for giving information or wondering aloud or being with parents. And we'll talk a little more about this, but about really how to do that. So the things we have down here are the things that we can offer you. And I'm talking to all of you in all counties and those of you at home watching on your computers. Please think about this. Look at the menu of training options. We can offer you consultation, mental health, and even developmental consultation through our colleagues for you as a group. We can offer Circle of Security parenting. For those of you who don't know this, Circle of Security is a parenting group model that really talks about secure relationships and really helps parents really understand the importance of their own relationship. We can train in the FAN. I don't know if you've heard about FAN, but FAN is a kind of process-oriented model about how you really understand a little more about what you're doing and how you are with families. And there's also attachment vitamins, which is another attachment-based thing. So these are things that we think of as on the prevention end that we can kind of help you with. And here are some examples from the communities that are now part of strategies in our learning collaborative of things in your counties and your communities that I think of as being on the prevention spectrum. So you can see Nurse Family Partnership, Nurturing Parenting, Triple P, the Head Start programs, and here are the others. I mean, what's kind of beautiful about going through this, Strengthening Families, more Triple P, Changing Tides, shout out to you in the room. You have all of these different kind of groups that you do there, and Lake County's various groups, which include Circle of Security and Tribal Health. So these are all things that you're already doing. You're in the room, and I am kind of suggesting that you're on the prevention continuum, but you may decide that you're somewhere else on that continuum. I want to kind of emphasize that in everything that we do, this idea of a two-generation approach is one that emphasizes that when you're talking about children, you're talking about, again, their lives with parents and their caregivers. So two-generation really recognizes that if you're entering on the child side, you have to be thinking about what you do with the parents. And if you're entering on the parent side, you have to hold in mind that these parents probably have children. And for a while in my own program, which is an infant mental health program, we were kind of puzzling with ourselves. When we see parents alone in a therapy situation, how are we different as an infant mental health provider from another therapist in the community who sees adults in clinical practice. And we asked ourselves this question, and here's what we came up with. We're different because when I sit with you in the room as a parent, I'm holding your child in my mind. I see you as connected to a baby or a young child. I'm not sure that the private adult therapist is thinking quite that way. And that even though that child is not in the room, that child lives in my mind, and the relationship between you and your child lives in our minds, and that child has a representational place in the room. Does that make sense? So really this two-generation approach is, to me, really important. And this is another thing I like. This is from the Center for the Developing Child at Harvard University, and they have fantastic resources, which you should really tap into. But they've really been promoting this idea of core capabilities in parents, and that by supporting young children in a two-generation model, we have to also support core capabilities, of which you see them up there, kind of executive function things like planning and self-control, flexibility, awareness. And the question is how we do this. And I'll just give you one example of how we did this in my own program. At some point, we had funding to develop a developmental playgroup model, and we wanted to target fathers and young children. And we partnered with a re-entry program in West Oakland, which emphasized job development. So these were men who had gotten out of jail and were re-entering and needing kind of support. And the West Oakland project was really about job development and job training. And we literally partnered with them and brought our program. It was called POPS. And it was really about fathers and children. And we took the child development and taking those kind of combining with the job redevelopment skills and what's happened to you that you ended up kind of in this situation that landed you in jail. And now you're coming back to the community and your family. And how do we combine supporting these core capabilities of the adults with how that translates into experiences that you have with your child? We used a circle of security model, and we did a kind of group. And as part of that, we went on outings with dads and their kids, which included everything from like what's in your community, the library, the park, you know, the kind of things that you can do. And it was really kind of a nice way, like we really started to embrace this idea of how do we support in this two-generation model if we're thinking of relationships, but what about core capabilities? So the last part of the care continuum is treatment. And the top three are the ones that we've uncovered in your communities. Parent-child interaction therapy is happening in some communities here in the therapeutic kind of community, trauma-focused CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. People are doing child therapy at some of the kind of community and mental health agencies. What we have to offer on the treatment domain for these communities is child-parent psychotherapy. It's a trauma-focused treatment that is taught to mental health licensed or license eligible clinicians. Again, we're over here on that side of the care continuum, and that's an 18-month learning collaborative, and we will be offering at least one and hopefully two in these communities, and hope to really reach the mental health licensed community, which we feel is not as robust in these communities as we would like. And we would like to lure some of those private practice people and some of the other people into really working with young kids and really offer them that CPP training. So this is on the treatment end, but I'm curious to know whether you see yourselves as doing some of the treatment as well on this care continuum. So, so we're going to take a 15-minute or so a chance to kind of connect with each other. So those of you in your remote locations, this is what I thought of as the kind of questions that we could address. Where are your services on the care continuum, if you think about that? And what are examples of what you do in support of early childhood mental health? This is, again, part of trying to anoint each and every one of you as being one of the early childhood mental health providers, because you don't have to be on the treatment side to see of yourself as a provider. That's the whole point of trying to link these two things. You can be on the promotion, prevention, think of this as a continuum. You're there and we need you and we want you. And we want to think of ourselves regionally as having a really robust early childhood mental health workforce. So have a conversation, see what comes up. And those of you at home, if there are those of you at home still there, I don't want you to feel excluded. And so while this conversation is happening in the room amongst table groups in Ferris, I want to talk to you. So if you can talk, call in, use your microphone, use your chat room. Those of you who are watching this or tuning in on the computer, I'm making myself available to you or to discuss with you, or Miriam's in the room and she can do this too. And we want to have a conversation with you while this is happening there. So the rest of you in rooms with other people, let's take about 15 minutes to have a conversation about these questions or whatever else has come up. Okay? Let's try it. Wait, I'm gonna turn this off.
I know we were on the phone some time ago together.
Wait, where's this? Wait, I'm still online.
Consultation and 140, 180, no, 180, I think, for individual session. And then $50 for group session, but I think only certain locations offer therapy options. But I've always been interested, like down the line, in doing something along those lines. I don't know if they have any. I recently believe in like healing in community. We have locations all throughout SF, Oakland, Redwood City, and they just opened up a new location recently in San Jose. Like at the end of the day, like
from the conversation a little bit? What came up in your conversation? And it could be about anything, you know, well, hopefully this topic, but well, what came up in your conversation?
I hadn't fully formulated my thought, but here I go. Is it on?
Yes.
Okay. Well, one of the things that we were talking about, or I had reflected upon, was really just, I think there's really a hunger in our community for a place where we can interact as parents and learn this information in an organic way, and how us as service providers actually really have the power to facilitate and create environments to let that grow. And for me, that's something that's really been on my heart and my mind, is how do we do that community development where we create an environment, and then almost like you do in a preschool room, you set up the environment and you let them go and you let them learn and you let them take the lead. So that's what's been bubbling for me.
Meaning there's not a place for parents to really hear this or think with you or with themselves about how to really keep this going. That's what you're saying?
Yes, and really a place where child development knowledge becomes common knowledge. I think there's a disconnect there in our community.
One of the things that's I think come out of the ACEs work, and now that Nadine Burke-Harris is our new Surgeon General in California, her mission in some ways has been how do we get information about trauma, exposure to trauma, and the physiological piece of what trauma does, how trauma lives in the body and the implications for long-term health. And one of her goals has been parents deserve to have this information. If you come to the doctor and you have high blood pressure or you have diabetes, you get a lot of information about managing that, but you don't get a lot of information about this. And I think you're saying a similar kind of thing, like how do we find a place or a way to make information like this commonplace? And I was thinking it myself as I was preparing for this collaborative, thinking, wow, do we have parents in the room? And should we be having parents in the room with us as a co-learning community to kind of really think about exactly that? You know, don't parents too need to really understand, and what ways can we as providers, you know, we're going to move into talking about that. How do we share information with parents that we have that we think is really valuable about relationships? Great, thank you.
I'll note, I don't know if anybody in Lake County from the Lake Bloom program is there, but that's a playgroup. The parents drop in, and it's actually a recreational resource for them. But then there's child development knowledge shared.
Yeah, the playgroup community in Humboldt County is also incredibly robust. They have, playgroup has been a real modality for them to be inclusive and also reach a lot of parents with that. So it would be great as a region and community if something like that really were to blossom. That would be exactly the kind of thing that strategies really loves, and this partnership of what pops up as a learning community. Anybody else? Any other comment here? Okay, let's move on. So in the next small kind of section, we're going to talk a little bit about back to these kind of two sets of relationships. So we're going to go back to the idea of the parallel process between relationships. And now we're going to focus a little bit not on the parent-child relationship, but on the provider-parent relationship. And so again, thinking about these two relationships as being parallel together and really embodying in a way the idea that your relationship with a parent how you are in that relationship with a parent can itself be a model or a parallel to how you would like or what you want for the parent in their relationship with the child. So really holding that, and it sounds like such a simple concept, but it's really not, because anybody who's been a home visitor knows that as soon as you walk in the door, you don't know what you're walking into. And you can hold the most important, you can have an agenda, you can say, okay, I'm well regulated, I'm there, and then something happens and you're not that person at all. And so it's actually way more difficult to do this than it sounds, but we want to at least hold those ideas in head. Oh, so we all know the golden rule. We've all kind of been raised with this, do unto others. But what we're talking about here is what Jerry Paul, one of our mentors in the field of early childhood mental health, and Maria St. John called the platinum rule, which was do unto others as you would have others do unto others. And here's another one of those fantastic drawings from Amber in Humboldt County at a training who made this and is, don't you want to color that? I do too, which is why we're heading for our coloring book. So I love this as a way of really thinking about this platinum rule, and that we hold parallel process then as this platinum principle in the way that how people are treated affect how they feel about themselves and how they treat other people. And so even this notion of how you seek to understand the parent's worldview, how you really think carefully about who you are in that relationship, how you are always carrying with you what I do, what I say, how I am, is going to really help shape and influence how a parent is with their child. It's really taking a few minutes today to try and embed that principle in you and have you do it as a practice every day in the work that you do. And that's one of the things that I would call one of the unifying principles and practices that we're going to hold as an early childhood mental health workforce together, is that we're going to really understand this parallel process idea and think about ourselves this way. Oh, what do we have here? So let's think a little bit about our role as providers. And once we embrace this idea that the infant's experience and relationship is central to the idea of their sense of self, then the question is, how do we really use all of our work to enhance and support that social emotional development and that relationship? So this may just be tweaking a little bit how you already see yourselves, to really see yourselves as a relationship-based provider and what that really means, the kind of nuance of what that means. So again, how are we seen by parents? And I think we have to take some time in relationships to really understand that with the parents. I think that teenager always lives in my mind as one of those examples, but I think that my example early on today of the TSA a person and how I've kind of created a set of expectations, I think that initially the parents' perception of us is really based on projection. It's not really based on, it may be positive, like people may have a sense that, oh, First Five is the place in my community where they're always supportive and available, and I know that they are always going to be interested in me and my child, and there's going to be things and resources here. That may be a tremendously positive kind of way to think about it, but over in the mental health world, we used to call this idea institutional transference, that people had an expectation of an institution in a way. And so you may be part of, again, a family resource center, you may be part of a medical center, you may be part of a school district. And the question is, how is that institution held in the mind of a parent? You happen to work for them. And so regardless of who you are as an individual, you're going to be held in that set of projections. So if a parent has had a difficulty with, say, the regional center or the school district, you're going to walk right into that as another provider, because their expectation has been, well, you guys say you're going to call, but you actually don't call. Or really child welfare, where I live, is doing a pretty remarkable kind of try and change their image in the community from being the people who come in and remove your children and do that disproportionately to poor children of color. And they're trying to really create a little more of a sense of, we can be here to help. we can be here to support your family. We can go farther upstream to the prevention end. So that's a big, big ask in communities that have a long history of feeling this sense that child welfare is not your friend. That's a big switch. So if you're the child welfare worker that shows up at the door, or if you're a home visitor who shows up at the door and the last person there was a child welfare worker, good luck, because you're going to walk into that, again, set of projections about that. Have you been there? I see that just happened yesterday. Is that what happened? So, so I think that understanding that and really walking in with that in a little more of an empathetic way can really be helpful. So you can see the way that lens, again, it's another lens of expectation, can magnify things or distort things. And we have to confirm or disconfirm people's expectations. And the question is there time and space for that conversation? And do you walk in really interpreting, making meaning of the behavior of how you're greeted? So really, it can be you're not greeted, or the door isn't open, or in my teenager's example, you know, she didn't show up for quite a while or didn't answer the door. It can be that you are allowed in, but there's nobody really paying attention to you. The television's on, somebody's washing dishes, you're kind of ignored. I think the issue of like what the meaning of that is, what is that telling us about what that parent's experience has been? And really in that same conversation we had when we watched the two videos with those two dads and their kids and asked ourselves, what are these children learning about the world? I think when we walk into a complicated situation, we have to really take a moment to say to ourselves, what has this parent's experience been in the world? And what is this behavior telling me about that experience? So the shorthand, which we'll come back to next session and the session after that, is behavior always has meaning, whether it's the child's behavior or the adult's behavior. And we should take a moment to really think about that. So we have to kind of build trust. So let's watch this video together about empathy versus sympathy, and really be thinking about what does it mean to be empathetic? Like, how do we really listen to a parent through a lens of not judging, of being able to kind of walk in their shoes for a moment. And oftentimes, if we're there to offer child services, it's really to see the child that the parent sees, because that child may be a different child than you see. And you may be able to see strengths or challenges that the parent doesn't see at all. And so let's kind of see what this looks like. Take a look at this video.
So what is empathy, and why is it very different than sympathy? Empathy fuels connection. Sympathy drives disconnection. Empathy, it's very interesting. Teresa Wiseman is a nursing scholar who studied professions, very diverse professions where empathy is relevant, and came up with 4 qualities of empathy. Perspective taking, the ability to take the perspective of another person or recognize their perspective as their truth. Staying out of judgment, not easy when you enjoy it as much as most of us do. Recognizing emotion in other people and then communicating that. Empathy is feeling with people. And to me, I always think of empathy as this kind of sacred space when someone's kind of in a deep hole and they shout out from the bottom and they say, I'm stuck, it's dark, I'm overwhelmed. And then we look and we say, hey, I'm down. I know what it's like down here, and you're not alone. Sympathy is, ooh, it's bad, no, you want a sandwich? Empathy is a choice, and it's a vulnerable choice, because in order to connect with you, I have to connect with something in myself that knows that feeling. Rarely, if ever, does an empathic response begin with at least. I had it, yeah. And we do it all the time, because you know what? Someone just shared something with us that's incredibly painful, and we're trying to silver lining it. I don't think that's a verb, but I'm using it as one. We're trying to put the silver lining around it. So I had a miscarriage. Oh, at least you know you can get pregnant. I think my marriage is falling apart. at least you have a marriage. John's getting kicked out of school. At least Sarah is an A student. But one of the things we do sometimes in the face of very difficult conversations is we try to make things better. If I share something with you that's very difficult, I'd rather you say, I don't even know what to say right now. I'm just so glad you told me. Because the truth is, rarely can a response make something better. What makes something better is connection.
Can you resonate with that? Sorry, everybody. Yeah, I think it's another practice because it can really be so uncomfortable. And I think as promoting like one of our trainings, the fan training, I think the fan is very much about a set of core processes that really start with, do I notice when I'm stirred up in a situation? And can I, when I'm stirred up, push the pause button enough to just sometimes do nothing? There's another one of our little phrases that we really like. Don't just do something, stand there and pay attention. So I think that many of us who are trained in a kind of helping mode can go very quickly into doing, fixing. We call it fixing. The fan calls it doing. And that we find ourselves there a lot. And I can really relate to that. Oh, can I help by doing, by giving, by offering, and what it really means to kind of be with. You heard that term, be with, as opposed to, do for, whatever. So I think that this kind of idea of how we really think about empathy, in this case, it's empathy versus sympathy, but I think it's a really nice, cute little humorous way to say, what does empathy really look like? And what does it take to really be with somebody in a dark place and in a place? And we're all running into that because really, again, there's a lot of trauma and there's a lot of need and there's a lot of really complexity and difficulty in your communities. And it feels often like the fix for it is more resources for people are helping. And that's certainly true. I don't want to minimize the concrete resource part of what people have to offer, but I want to highlight the other part in addition to that, the kind of being with, having empathy, really seeking to understand where another person is coming from or a parent is coming from. And isn't that what we want parents to do with their children? The same thing is not just like waltz in and do something or fix it, but to really tolerate. Remember at the beginning, we talked about that mental wellness. Part of that was being able to tolerate some of those difficult emotions like disappointment or frustration or anger. And isn't that what we want to do when we're with parents too, is to tolerate that? So what are some tools for how to really think about where we start? And so this is just a kind of, again, this is a beginning as opposed to an end point. So think of this again as a learning collaborative. We're thinking and trying and playing with these ideas over the course of a year. We are doing a deeper dive in each of your counties with additional trainings and other opportunities and consultation. So these are just things to try on at the moment. And we'll be poking you. We call it pokes and nudges now. We've made these terms by really trying to reach out to you with resources, with surveys, with information, with articles to read, with links for you to go to, because we want you to not forget about these ideas. And we know that you're going to walk out of here and forget about well, probably more than that of this, but we want something to stick. So here are some ideas about how to really think about how you would join with people in a relational way from an empathetic point of view. So really in the short version, assess rather than assume, ask rather than act or tell, and acknowledge rather than accept. And so here's the don't just do something, stand there and pay attention. And even though you may have an agenda and you may think you know what's happening, remember that you've got to really understand the family you're in and the people there. Do you remember, did you read Or Seed to Kill a Mockingbird? I always love that Atticus Finch line where he says to Scout something like, I don't remember what it is, you don't know another person until you've walked around in their skin or something like that. And I kind of love that because I feel like I have to remind myself of that all the time, that I can really interpret something. And I feel really appreciative of the comment that you made about that dad, about maybe he's trying to set firm limits and whatever. That sense of there's lots of hypotheses in terms of thinking about why something's happening in the moment. And while we're having a strong reaction to, oh, this feels terrible and I don't like that, do we have any space to slow down and think about why is this happening right now? And that's that sense of assessing, like assessing meaning I may need more information. How do I find a way to ask a question about what's happening here rather than telling? So I don't like to be told what to do. And I've been noticing that recently because sometimes my husband, who's now on videotape now in this example, will try and listen to me talk about something and go right into telling me, or fixing it. And, he works in a profession where that's what he's kind of supposed to do. But I find myself always feeling like, oh, just stop telling me what, there I am. And then I think, as soon as I think it, I think, oh, my kids hate this when I do it too. And so there's that parallel process that we all have to really be mindful. So how do we instead approach things with curiosity? Like, I wonder what's happening here. I wonder what's really going on here, and be really, because again, in that parallel way, don't we want a parent, as they're moving into, you're in timeout, really be thinking, what is this child trying to tell me by whacking or throwing or doing things like that? And do I have even a piece of my mind where I can hold that curiosity and ask a set of questions? And really sometimes asking those questions, and again, I'm going to promote the fan a little bit, does that. It's like if we regulate ourselves first, we can join a parent in their dysregulated state by asking a set of questions. And hopefully as we do that and explore the feelings they're having and being curious about it, they can move themselves into a more regulated state and really begin to think through some solutions. And that Daniel Siegel, have you guys done the This Is Your Brain with Daniel Siegel? Who says, this is your brain and these are your frontal lobes. And when you're really under high stress or high trauma, you flip your lid, he calls it. So your frontal lobes are offline and you're in the throes of your amygdala, really responding with great feeling. But often we walk into that and we try and talk to people. We try and relate to people with a cognitive explanation. Well, guess what? That processing center is offline right now. And I think we have to be with people and be a co-regulator in a way that works a little better. So how do we really do that in order to shift perspective? This idea of acknowledging rather than accepting is by way of saying, you can understand somebody else's experience and acknowledge what's going on without necessarily agreeing with them. So you can really engage in a conversation that may feel difficult. And this is about taking on some of those challenging issues. Like if we were in the room with that dad we saw on videotape and you were the home visitor and that was happening, what would you be doing? And we could sit and talk for probably an hour about what each of us would do in that moment. And a lot of that discussion would be like, oh my goodness, I have to regulate myself, like from taking over or rescuing or whatever. But what would we do and how would we find an intervention that really could shift both the experience of that child and the father's understanding of what the child's experience is and still support his efforts? Say his effort was about, this is the rule, and even though I'm sitting here myself with the Coke, you can't have it or something like that. And he's supporting that follow through. How might we have a conversation about that? That includes both what the child's experience is and really is supportive of what he's really trying to do in his own idea. So I think you're demonstrating when you ask and when you assess and when you acknowledge that there are always different perspectives on how to really understand something, and you're creating a reflective space in order to really be thoughtful, to slow down a little bit, to push a pause button, to kind of not feel like you have to do right away, just kind of breathe and re-regulate. And in that sense, we're in that parallel process way, passing some of those skills on to parents as well. So in terms of going back to how do we promote social emotional health and secure and optimal relationships, if things are going well, let's not forget about the notice confirming. And those are the moments when things are going well where you really can enter with your psychoeducation and give information in drops. Remembering that unlike today where I'm throwing a lot of stuff at you, when we're with parents, like less is more. And sometimes it's really about a little information and repeated information. And sometimes it's in that, what I'm calling a non-didactic way. It's not instructional at all. It's just like, oh my gosh, he likes you so much. And I'll tell you one little vignette, because if you live next door to me, this is the kind of thing that happens. I walked out of my house one day and there's a crack in my walk, a brick walk, and the bricks have settled and there's like an inch difference. And this couple's walking up the street with a new walker in a stroller. He's gotten out of the stroller. And this child has become completely fascinated with this gap in my sidewalk. And what is she doing? She's toddling over and she gets to the gap and she steps over it like it's a giant cliff. And then she masters it back and forth. And I, of course, I teach a class in child development. And I said to them, would you mind if I videotaped? Because I was so enthralled with this child. But my being so enthralled was all about what I considered developmental information. Like, oh my goodness, look how your child is mastering this. Like, she's so enamored with doing this. And at one point it was like, have you heard of the visual cliff? She literally got down and like did this, climbing over this 1-inch thing. And I was just so mesmerized. And my pleasure in their child was such a pleasurable encounter for them. And here's a kind of example of noticing and confirming and really not forgetting that taking pleasure in what a child is doing is the most powerful intervention oftentimes that you can give. If the relationship is more distressed, then information is not going to work because people can't take it in that moment. And so it's not the time. And you're going to have to really use all these skills that we're talking about to develop some understanding and hypothesis about what's going on that's creating what we're calling this tangle in their relationship. And that it may be you and your relationship that can really shift that interaction. And remember, as you do that and can create a shift, you're creating a lens of expectation in somebody about, oh, it's possible to get through this, or, oh, there's another way to think about it. So you have a lot of kind of power in that. So again, how you are is as important as what you do. Notice what you bring and how you feel and how you regulate yourself. Practice that you recognize when something's happening to you, because sometimes we don't even know it. And really be mindful of a kind of mindful attention to what you're doing. Take a moment to self-regulate. You know that put your oxygen mask on before you help your child. It's really that kind of moment. So we're going to sum up and really think about the kind of bullet points of what we covered today. So remember, notice and amplify what's going well. Provide psychoeducation in small doses if you're going to kind of do that curricular thing. Offer developmental guidance by wondering and being curious. Remember my little vignette about the child in the car seat? How there's different ways to really do that. And what does it mean to be curious and take notice of things in a different way that's going to help support that relationship? Partner with parents. They are your partners and they're the experts on their children. We really aren't. So we bring a kind of knowledge and expertise and experience to theirs, and we have to find ways to do with and not do to or do for. And I think that's a huge challenge, but I kind of ask you to rise to the challenge and kind of think about that. When needed, co-regulate. By that I mean you can be tolerant, be patient, you can absorb that, you can be empathetic in terms of being a listening ear. Contain that kind of negative feelings and use your own mindful self-regulation to not really get, kind of blown up yourself in some ways about what to do. I think holding hope is really important. And I want to just say that can be a whole big piece of what you do, because in the moment that people are suffering, they cannot see the other side. I think that little video where they drop into the dark hole is a kind of good representation of that. You can't really see outside of that when you're really engulfed, and you can hold hope that this is not a lifetime, that this can have another kind of outcome, and that's really important. Bringing a non-judgmental, empathetic stance, and making sure that you see the child, the parent sees. You make real effort to do that, and that's not easy. But it's really, really important. And we often in our assessment say that straight out to parents, that we are here to see the child that you see, particularly when parents come in and we want to reassure them that whatever happens in this room, is okay with us, and we hope it's okay with you, because we're really interested in seeing the child that you see and what brought you here today, so that we can partner with you and offer some help. And I think the way that you introduce your services and introduce yourself, the promotional materials, your language, your demeanor, everything you are, all conveys that. Like, you do convey in how you are, from every single thing you do, what your program represents and what's important. So really, today is about really clarifying a lot of these concepts and holding our attention. So again, these are our benchmarks. They're listed. We're going to come back to them over and over again over the course of the year. And I hope that all worked for you as a kind of introduction. So I'm going to hand this back over, a little 5 minutes late, to Susan.
No worries.
Okay.
That was excellent, Margaret. Thank you. So we want to wrap up with another opportunity for you to do some networking wherever you are. If you are in a remote site or if you're online, we'd like to have you think about these questions. And if you are in a remote location, then that means that the person who kind of set up your room and it's the facility. And also kind of launching our thoughts. Oh, did I say all of that and nobody heard? Oh, I'm sorry about that. So we're wrapping up. I'm sorry, I just gave a whole spiel without a microphone. So we're going to wrap up with a few questions. They're reflective questions. They're a chance for you to network in your room. The facilitator in each one of the remote sites will summarize the response to these questions. And after about 15-20 minutes, I'm going to ask you to feed back that summary so that we can hear across everybody what your thoughts were on these questions. So the first question is, what caught your attention as an opportunity for your organization within this early childhood mental health continuum of care? The second question that I'd like you to consider is, what is a key point that you learned that you'd like to share with your colleagues, because you're not with all of your colleagues in this room or wherever you are or online? So what would you like to share with your colleagues, and where might you be able to do that? Do you have an opportunity within your organization? Do you have a staff meeting? Do you have other kinds of planning meetings? Would there be a place that you could share this? Is there a collaboration that you're a part of that you could say, you know, I've been giving some thought to this, and this is whatever that might be that comes to your mind? And then the third thing that I'd like you to think about is, if we were to craft an early childhood mental health vision for this northern region of these 12 counties, and some of you may already been thinking about this within your own organization, so we could build off of that. But if we were going to craft that vision, what keywords, in other words, we're not trying to create the vision, we're just trying to tease out, what would we want to be thinking about in terms of what we envision around early childhood mental health, not only in your community, but expanding on that into a region? What keywords or phrases do you see that would be important to that statement? So I'll give you about 15-20 minutes. The questions are here for you to see. Again, network in your area where you are in your location, and then we'll have report out. The facilitator will summarize what was discussed. Okay. Anything else there? Next question then. What is a key point you learned that you'd like to share with your colleagues?
Empathy versus sympathy.
Empathy versus sympathy. That was a cute little clip. Very effective.
Behaviors always have meaning.
Behavior always has meaning. It's a good thing for us to remember. Anything else?
I've always, the point about keeping the child in your mind, so even like me when I'm working in a psychiatric facility with adults, which is my normal job as an RN, is those people have kids and I need to be thinking about those kids.
Keeping the child in mind. Anything else?
We need to take our lens out, our expectations out of the situation.
Take your expectations out of, I missed the last word, of the situation. Anything else you want to go on here? Okay, moving to the last one. If you were to craft an ECMH vision for the northern region, what key words or phrases would you see as important to what we could envision together?
Instilling hope.
Instilling hope.
Reaching out.
Reaching out.
Community.
Community.
Empowered caregiving.
Empowered caregiving. Anything else?
Trust-based.
Trust-based. Those are all really great words. Anything else?
Non-judgmental.
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 Okay. Anything else you want to add? Okay. Very good. Excellent. Thank you. We'll listen to what the other groups have to say. Unless, did the onliners put anything?
The online audience had some great conversations about all three questions. The most recent sort of conversations was
This one?
Was actually this one. I'm going to kind of go backwards here, but talking about the importance of relationships, that came up sort of throughout all three of the questions, and the importance of nurturing relationships. So specifically, thank you to Jennifer and Michelle for sharing those recent at the end. Yeah, and sharing these key points about relationships with advocates.
Are we here
staff.
now? Are we still here? Okay.
So again, talking about the importance of relationships and sharing that in team meetings with staff, with advocates, with families. That was another really important discussion that was going on.
Okay, so we have, adding to our words over here for what we envision was the importance of relationship and nurturing relationships, and then a place where they could take that message was sharing it in a team meeting or with families.
Yes, so they also talked about continuing to be relationship-based in providing family supports. And that would be a great place for it. Again, not everything went directly under the question since it's, you know, the online audience, things kind of
Yeah, sure.
flow a little differently.
Anything else to add from them?
Again, there was a big conversation about that, and then some other sort of takeaways from the reflections as a whole were the difference between doing with and doing for, and they really resonated with the doing with. And that's another thing that people wanted to share with their organizations, especially those sort of words and that sort of perspective, and also acknowledging rather than accepting, and everything in that discussion as well.
Yeah, wow, that was great.
Yeah, lots of really great points were brought up by the online audience. So.
Thank you so much for sharing that. We had a good online group, so I'm glad that they are giving us some feedback right now. Fantastic. Okay, where shall we go? Let's go to Humboldt County and see what they have to report out. That would be Dora.
Okay, 1 second. Let me unmute her. Okay, Dora.
Hi, Susan.
Hi, how are you doing?
Doing well. How are you?
I'm very well.
For the first question of what caught our attention,
Yep.
The idea to broaden the awareness and expand the knowledge regionally and across disciplines. Having a common language and approach for true transdisciplinary work. Another thing that caught our attention was the lack of representation of non-Western models. So how to translate this across cultures, including tribal cultures, Latin, Asian, or socioeconomic differences. And then it was about accessibility.
Okay. Well, those are great ideas.
And then for the key points, so your second one, the 2-generation approach was definitely a standout. We felt that in Humboldt, we have a good foundation of our early childhood mental health, but it was definitely a reminder of how we regard people and share space and the focus on the relationship, as well as a reminder of our tools, such as the ASQ or other assessments for how they're used and the interaction in conjunction with the tool.
Okay.
And then, so keywords and phrases. We have relationship-based, cultural humility, trauma-informed, trauma-responsive.
Going too fast.
I didn't know if we've matched other ones, you asterisk them.
What did you say after relationship based, Dora?
Cultural humility.
Okay. 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 So after trauma, okay, resilience, all right.
Resiliency, yeah, along with the trauma. Diverse. Empathy. Developmentally appropriate and responsive. Family empowerment. And then parents are the experts.
Ah, great. All righty. That's great. That gives us a lot to think about. Is that it? Did we capture everything, Dora?
That's what we had.
Okay, thank you so much. Sounds like you had good conversation there. How about Mendocino County? Sharon? You still there?
Yeah, I'm here. We actually have a partner.
I don't think they can hear you. Are you muted?
I'm not muted. Can you hear us?
We
Yes.
can hear you.
Okay. We have a partnership participant. So during some of the breaks, we talked about the new recommendations and requirements for the state of California to define ACEs assessments for Medi-Cal youth, and we talked about a need for training. So that would bring us to which was a resource. So the very first one of what caught our attention is you have given us quite a few handouts, and I appreciate that, as does everybody here, but especially there were resources that were defined for further trainings within each of our organizations. We really appreciate that. And we also look at opportunities to expand the resources beyond what you sent us in handouts through the contacts that are participating in this listserv as a whole. So not just within each of the hubs, but I'm hoping that there can be a consolidated resource as to who participated and what where they work with, as if any questions may need to be handled. And then what is the key point we learned? Our group saw it as how we are seeing relationships and dealing with the families that we work with, and definitively changing the frame of the lens of expectations to relationships and relationship buildings within the family. And then the vision were a lot of the key words that Humboldt gave you, but ours were also collaborative, inclusiveness, empathy, reflective, compassion, curiosity. We really want to see a campaign to support families again, as we identified that one of our biggest challenges are the families that we are working with don't have that core support of either a spouse or extended siblings or extended families to support them, and then culturally competent.
Great. Sounds like you had a really good conversation too.
Mendocino, this is Barbara. I want to respond to your first point about the training for coming down the pike around using trauma measures for Medicaid recipients. And if you have particularly medical clinics that are interested in learning more about that training, it would be great for you to contact us directly, because we may have some good connections for you in terms of doing that specific kind of training. And that's true for everybody as well.
And I'm sorry, who's speaking?
This is Barbara.
That was Barbara.
So you have my email address right on the front of the PowerPoint.
Okay,
And
sounds good.
just reach out. We can have more of a conversation.
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. You're getting another comment.
This is Miriam, Sharon. So I just want to let you know also that myself and somebody else from our grant had about an hour conversation with Lucretia and somebody else from Mendocino Coast Clinics, exactly around the referral screening. So just so you have that information too.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Lake County, Doreen.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes.
All righty. So our public health, we went through and just asked the agency people. And public health, they were all for the prevention and promotion, and they really liked the clarity of the definition of early childhood mental health. They say that's really lacking, and they liked that clarification. And we had other people from Easter Seals also liking the concept of the definition. We had partnership. They liked all the ideas for the community, and they liked all the collaboration that was happening. Redwood Community Services, they liked the fact that they like the direct services and the cultural understanding, and the staff to the, they just like the parent support and being where the parent is at. They do a lot of home visitation. A lot of parents come in, and sometimes you always have to remind yourself to be where the parent's at. Easter Seals, she really liked the word continuum. She hadn't heard continuum with mental health before, and she really liked that. And she really wanted more behavioral health resources, and she needs those. And then, but she likes the fact that we're all here, we're getting on the same page, and again, that language. Department of Social Services, they had a lot of, they need a lot of language changing. They really need to work on their parallel process. The two generations, they need a lot more training on that. We all agreed on that in the room. Tribal health, they like the idea of bringing more knowledge and the respect issues, and again, you know, letting parents remembering to, you know, be sympathetic and respectful to parents. I mean, not sympathetic, more empathy. Yeah, and then let's see, relational intervention. Department of Social Services says there is a huge problem with relational interventions, and so they need to really work on that. And then also Easter Seals, our regional center, she liked the opportunities to change the trajectory. She just really liked it, true generational again. They said they've had some coaching on this. They think more people need that. Institutional, transference, and then bringing hope. She said one part of it was focusing on hope, and she just loved that. So those were our kind of discussions all through the room.
Those were your opportunities, Doreen?
Well, most of them, we just started with what caught your attention, and everybody just started going through all of them, whatever hit them the most. So
okay. So was that everything all rolled into one?
That was everything all rolled into one. Sorry about that, Susan. We just, yeah.
No worries. I got it all down, but I didn't get it on the 3 different pages, but that's okay. So, and it was great that you also kind of outlined it by the participants and organizations in your room and how they saw the different opportunities and key words that caught their attention, and how we might wrap that into a vision eventually as we keep thinking about this. Okay, So we have 5 more minutes, and I just want to ask the question, did everybody get a chance to complete their evaluations in the remote locations? And also online. We just want to make sure that everybody gets those evaluations completed. And no, Siskiyou did not. Is Shasta still on the line? Let's try to
Yes,
catch her.
I'm here.
There you are, Shasta. Okay.
Hi.
Thank you for the reminder. Tell us what opportunities you saw.
Well, we discussed that there's an opportunity to invite and get with other organizations in which this information would be very beneficial to bring us together as a whole.
That sounds great.
Another one was disseminating developmental information and expanding education to parents.
Okay. Anything else under the opportunities?
The last thing under opportunities was we have a Strengthening Families Consortium, and I think that would be a great avenue to expand with this information.
So Michelle. Doesn't say your name, it says Michelle.
Okay. How about any key point that you learned and shared, or was that part of what you just said to me, Shasta?
No, we have some key points, 2 key points.
Okay.
One was the lens of expectation. We really like that.
Okay.
And under the relationship contributors for development, the provider with the parent, I found that very interesting. I'll take that back to my colleagues.
Okay. How about the different words that might contribute to a vision statement?
We have the word safe, encouraging, enriching, and building blocks.
Great. Anything else?
Nope, that's it.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Sounds like you had a good conversation in your group, and I know you have a lot of collaboration that's going on in your community too, which I think is the case for all of the communities that we're working in. So how can we move this kind of information through our collaborations, through our contacts, bring it into a cross-sector kind of continuum, and think about, again, I think there were some comments made along the way. Already you're starting to think, how could this become something we shape together and put into the region? So thank you for your attendance today and your wonderful participation and all the input and feedback. And thank you, Barbara, for the excellent presentation and all of the really useful information you brought forth, and also your expertise and experience in this field. So we appreciate that enormously. And I have the evaluations filled out here, so I'm hopeful that the evaluations are filled out in all of the other locations as well. Did you want to say something to wrap
I
up, Barbara?
did. I just wanted to thank everybody, both in the room and in remote locations, for our ability to join with strategies and with all of you. And my understanding of this is that we will see you in November. And though I won't be in this room, it's fantastic to have seen all of you and met you, because now I'll be holding you in mind while we're in Humboldt. And I really am mindful that we have the opportunity here to really create a regional collaborative, and I'm extremely excited about it. So I want to encourage you again to contact us and warn you that we have your email, and we will be contacting you because we want to stay in touch with you, resources, personal conversations, trainings, and all of those collaborative things. So that's true for everybody who's on this call and those of you online who I want to make sure feel included as well. So thank you all, and we'll see you in November.
November 7th, to be exact. Same time, 1 to 4, and we will be in Humboldt as our hub location at that time. Thank you again very much. Enjoy your weekend.